It's Monday, July 1st, 2024, and that means it's time for the Knee Jerks podcast of Eno, Nick, and Big Al. I am the Big Al, the Equation, Al Beaton, longtime Detroit-based podcaster, blogger, and man about town. I have no idea at this point, because I don't even know where I'm living at this point, so I'm all over the damn state, it seems like. But regardless of all that, let's get to introductions, because we have a lot to talk about. We're probably going to have a little shorter show, because we're getting a little later start than normal today. So first off, let's welcome our left coast correspondent. That would be Nick Milanovich. How's things, Nick?
Hey, doing pretty well. And I can actually say with honesty this time that it's sunny Seattle. The weather's been nice over here. I wish I was getting out a little more, but everything's going well.
Awesome. And of course, the my partner in crime for the past like 25 years, at least that's what it feels like at this point, but it's probably like 15. And that would be Greg Eno, who has also been traveling the state in his RV. Greg, how was your mini vacation?
Wonderful. You can't beat a weekend with the RV, especially when you're right by the lake, as we were, and just a beautiful evening on Saturday night. And we love to get out. And when you're, Al, you said you're all over the state. That's when you're not in Florida. When you're all over that state.
Right, yeah.
You know, you're really traveling. I am Greg Eno from my Greg Eno Substack. I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to it. I will be in your inbox pretty much every Monday if you do so. It's gregeno.substack.com. Follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno, and of course follow the Knee Jerks on Twitter at the Knee Jerks. We have Al. Before I get into this, though, are we going to do the birthday first clue of the birthday game now? Before we get
let's knock it out. Let's get it knocked out.
Okay. Before we get to our guest, that's fine. Before we get to our guest, we're going to play a little game that we like to call Whose Birthday Is It, Maestro? Everybody knows how we play this game by now. I give Al and Nick, a clue or two or three of an individual whose birthday it is today in the world of sports. And if one of those gentlemen can guess that person correctly within the first two clues, he will receive Copenhagen and Skoal chewing tobacco along with Happy Days mint. Just a pinch between the cheek and gum, and you'll be all set. That's according to Walt Garrison.
I was just going to ask you, who was that running back who did the ads? Yes, Walt Garrison of the Cowboys.
Walt Garrison, right. Just a pinch between the cheek and gum. Mm-hmm. This person made his name in hockey. I will say that he was born in this state in 1941. Sadly, passed away in 2021 at the age of 80. But he was essentially. This might be a giveaway clue. He played his entire career, though, I will say this, with one original 16. He was with one original 16 and is a Hockey Hall of Famer and was a, what can I say, part of the gag line.
Yeah, because some of the guys I was thinking of played at least with one or two other teams, like Phil Esposito or
right.
A guy like that, who's in that same range. Jeez, the gag line. It's something we should know, but
I've never heard of it, so I'm going to guess Stan Mikita.
No, good guess though.
That's a good guess. That's a good guess. Yes,
good guess.
Yeah,
that's a very good guess actually, but it's not. It's not Stan.
All right, so I guess we'll fight for the tobacco sometime later in the show. But Greg, we have one of our favorite guests on. We have a lot to cover when it comes to the Pistons and NBA. So let's introduce our special guest.
Yeah, when we scheduled Siddy Hall to be on this program for this date, we knew it was going to be 5 days after the draft. That much we did know. We did not know that there was going to be as much news, Pistons related and NBA, more Pistons than NBA though, related as is going on right now. So we couldn't be more fortunate to have timed this the way we did. Siddy Hall, a resident stats man, NBA guru, stats guru, whatever you want to call him here, a regular NBA guy, Pistons guy here in the Knee Jerks is with us. And Siddy, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Greg. Hi, Big Al. Hi, Nick.
Hey.
Thanks for having me again. I kind of feel like today's maybe the sub theme is going to be the Pistons' irrational exuberance. Is that the way everybody's feeling right now?
Well,
maybe
see.
They'll win 25.
Maybe. Well, that's really.
Well, irrational's right.
Yeah, yeah, that's for sure. I
That's a
hardly
great-
know where to begin because like I said, the NBA draft, which almost seems like it's funny because when we did this schedule, we said, well, we'll do the NBA draft talk because the draft will have been 5 days prior. And my goodness, the draft seems like a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, considering what all has gone on with the Pistons, new coach, new Pobo, of course, Tobias Harris signing, rumors that Kate Cunningham's going to sign a max extension. They got Tim Hardaway Jr. It's just all these things are going on. They cut loose with Evan Fournier, and here we are. So I don't know. I guess we'll start with the and then the draft, of course, with Ron Holland. But I guess let's start with the most recent and work our way back a little bit because I think that's probably what people will want to hear most. Today was announced that Tobias Harris was going to sign a 2-year, $52 million contract.
Since the free agency started, it seemed like nobody was knocking on the Pistons' door. It was like, oh my God, the chaos is just going to continue. Nobody wants to come here. So finally, when Tobias Harris signed for 2 years, it was quite a relief, especially when the dollar figure wasn't as high as it was high, but not as high as a lot of people feared. 2 years.
Yeah, he's coming off of making, I think, 32, 33, 34 million, something like that with the Sixers. And now he gets 2 years for 52, so about 26 a year, with maybe it's commensurate with, the fact he is going to be 32 in a couple of weeks and so forth. I wrote a piece today that said that I thought this kind of gives the team a little bit more legitimacy, only because, these aren't the corpses of Joe Harris and Taj Gibson that they're bringing in. This is a guy who can play basketball. He can shoot the three. He's a little bit maligned in Philly. It didn't end well. Game 6 of the series against the Knicks, he went scoreless in 29 minutes and so forth. He's getting a lot of flack for that, but he's still a good, solid NBA player. And what does this mean, if anything, in terms of moving the meter with the Pistons?
Well, the first thing about Tobias, the guy he's like a clock. Every year his numbers are the same. Even this past year, he was being attacked. I don't know why. Numbers look fine to me. He's the same guy he has been for many years.
Right.
And with the 2-year deal, the risk is pretty low. It reminds me a little bit of year 1 of Weaver, the Weaver era. They brought in Wayne Ellington on a cheap contract, but he served the same purpose, a stabilizer who could knock down some threes, and he had a big impact. So, yeah, Tobias has to help. It was very clear last year that the spacing on the floor was a mess. When Muscala and Gallinari showed up for 2 weeks, things suddenly improved just by adding a little dash of 3-pointers. So it's good. I'm kind of laughing, though, because, Tobias, I don't know if it's still true, but I believe his father is his player rep. And I was very impressed in his last contract. He just walked into the Philly front office with a green Elton Brand, the new president, and basically just told Elton what the deal is going to be. And Elton said, okay, and gave him a max deal for, 4 or 5 years. It was a pretty big contract at that time.
Right.
So I was fearing for the worst.
Right.
I thought maybe, Tobias Sr. or whatever his name was going to hold Detroit over the barrel. So, you want my son to play for your horrible organization? That's an extra $10 million a year, right?
Right.
So I'm relieved. $25 million in today's market. That's not bad.
In only 2 years too, which is so the term is not an albatross, that's for sure. Tobias was being linked to the Pistons. It seems like for a long time before this happened, way before, maybe even before the regular season ended. I was hearing Tobias Harris Pistons talk. What do you think sold? I know why the Pistons would want Harris, but what do you think Siddy sold Harris on the Pistons?
Well, they had to convince him that a mentoring role was good for his career at this point. He was giving up a chase for the rings. So that would be the primary selling point. And, of course, a nice contract. But, talking about free agency, though, and contracts and that, the big news, though, is it's kind of the elephant in the room. And that's, Cade Cunningham and the extension. They have to get that settled before the season starts, or else he's going to go enter next year, as the potential of doing a Greg Monroe move and leaving the organization after one more year. Right. So until he signs, that possibility is going to be looming. It's rarely taken. I can't think of anyone besides Greg Monroe who has gone that route. But my goodness, if you can think of any situation that might create a guy wanting to leave, it's this. The chaos. The
Well,
losses.
it's been reported that there's a 5-year, $226 million offer that is about to be signed, but he can't sign it, of course, until Saturday. It's coming from pretty good sources that's going to happen. I think it will. Do you think it will?
I'll believe it when I see it. Bobby Marks, he's a good source too, and he wrote that no deal is imminent. And he also, he works for ESPN. He has his connections too.
Right.
So maybe, Cade's going to think about it. He has until October. They can't change the money. They can't make it any bigger. It's a max. So he has to, does he want to gamble and risk injury? And we saw what happened with Sadiq Bey. The poor guy tore his ACL when he was finally going to get a payday.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's a risk. So in Cade's case, everyone seems to just assume that he's going to take the money because the gamble's too great. And he can force his way out another way if he wishes.
Right.
So I was not aware that, they can't sign until Saturday. That's news to me. But I guess what, July 7th? Okay, July 7th or something, right?
Yeah.
But let's see what happens. That'll be a huge. We got to get Cade signed because if they mess that up. I mean, this franchise is just a horrible situation.
We're talking with Siddy Hall, our resident NBA stats guru and Pistons expert here on the Knee Jerks. I'm Greg Eno from my gregeno.substack.com. Nick Milanovich is here. We'll get to Nick in a second. Of course, Big Al Beaton is with us as well. Let's pivot a little bit now to the most, again, we'll take this news and kind of go backwards a little bit. The next step back from the Tobias Harris news is, of course, the hiring of JB Bickerstaff as the coach, which has not been formally announced. They haven't presented JB to the press yet, but that's also basically a done deal. Pistons Twitter, Reddit seems to be okay with this. I saw some Cavaliers fans even that chimed in on Pistons Reddit say, "Here, Cavalier fan here, good move on the Pistons part. He'll be okay." What do you think about JB?
Well, first, if we're going chronologically, you're skipping Bloody Saturday when 7 heads rolled down the street. Evan Fournier, Malachi Flynn, half the roster went to the guillotine.
R.I.P. Buddy Boeheim. Yes,
Buddy Boeheim, right? Yeah, his right. The nepotism effect, right? So I have it written here: Boeheim, Chimezi Metu, Stanley Umude, Fournier, Troy Brown Jr., James Wiseman's in there somewhere.
Right.
The trading of Quentin Grimes. I mean, that was a massacre. Not quite on the scale of back in the day of Mickey Stanley and Jim Northrup and Norm Cash in terms of effect on the franchise. But that was bloody, man. Trajan coming in with the guillotine and putting it to use. But back to answer your question, JB Bickerstaff, my reaction was the same as what you just described. He's competent. Is he great? I don't know. He seemed to be, I thought he did a good job with Cleveland. They went through some periods where they had injuries and they were winning. So, he grew up in the game. His dad, of course, was in the game forever. He's had a lot of, his whole adult life, he's been coaching at the NBA level at some way or another. So, seems okay. I'm not going to get excited. I'm not going to criticize it. Given the situation, I'm fine with it. I was kind of hoping they would sign Borrego from New Orleans, who used to coach Charlotte. That was my first choice, but
he took himself out of the running, I heard, though.
Took himself out. Yeah, he's one of those guys. He got fired, and it took a couple of years for everyone to figure out he actually was pretty good. He maxed out Charlotte, and nobody could realize it at the time. And so he would have been good. But, JB's fine.
Okay, well, let's – okay, but aside from that, what you just said, no matter who they would have picked to be coach, well, first of all, before I get to that question, let me ask you this real quick. Were you surprised? And if you were, I'm sure you were pleasantly surprised. Were you surprised that Gores ate the Monty Williams contract? Let's ask you that question.
Well, rumors had been leaked in the media that he was willing to do it. So, everything was being leaked at first. There was a leak that the new guy could fire Troy Weaver. And then the leak was that it's possible the coach could go. So I wouldn't say I was surprised, but as you mentioned earlier, things were moving kind of slowly. And maybe begin to think we'll stand pat. That's our best option, with the sunk cost. But it was a relief, right? I think everybody was a little bit relieved about this. Time for a new start. Monty was a nice guy, good guy.
Yeah,
but
well, I'm sure. I'm sure.
But you were always trying to read the tea leaves and trying to figure out if a guy's a good coach or not. And one thing that I found, a couple things I found confusing about him, one is demeanor on the sidelines. The guy should have been getting a little bit more
Did we lose
angry once in a while. He was very under control, very cerebral, too cerebral. Sports are emotional. You gotta get your team fired up. You gotta bark at the refs. And he wasn't seemed to be cut out for that. Another thing that I thought was kind of odd, it was just a small detail. Maybe I'm reading into it too much. But, Monty Morris had his number retired by, I believe it was Flint Beecher, wherever he went to high school.
Yeah, you're right.
When Monty, in between the 6 games that he appeared in, he went over and had his number retired. And some of the team went with him, including Monty Williams. And I remember seeing video of that, and it just looked weird. Like, why is Monty there? He's not a player. He's not in that group. It's almost like, he couldn't he wanted to be accepted by them. I don't know. It was just kind of odd. It seemed like he didn't belong there. The boundaries were crossed,
Uh-huh.
But anyway, we're moving on. New chapter. JB Bickerstaff. I like JB. It seems like a good signing.
Well, the thing is that regardless of who they would have selected to replace Monty, what when you're going into a situation that's this dire, you've won 14 games, you've won 31 games over the past 2 seasons. No matter who they pick, what is the role of this new guy? What is he supposed to do? Is he a teacher? Is he a guy just to try to establish some culture? Is he a player developer? Is he all of those things? What is the role of a coach coming into this situation versus the situation JB came into, for example, in Cleveland, where he was jumping in after the John Beilein experiment failed? That was a different situation. What is the role of a guy that takes this job right now in Detroit?
Right now, we got to get credibility. The franchise needs credibility. The team needs credibility. JB has to walk in there and establish credibility, get the players to, earn their respect and, and lick the wounds and move on. Last year was just, was painful.
Right.
Got to get Cade Cunningham on board. Got to, so that things don't deteriorate. Things were beginning to deteriorate last year. So it starts there. It's just about getting the locker room together and getting the guys to believe in each other. It's got the vets now to help out, Tobias, Tim Hardaway Jr. Hopefully they can contribute in that way. But it starts with relationships and Cade and going from there.
We're talking with Siddy Hall, our NBA stats guru here in the Knee Jerk. So let's bring in Nick Milanovich. What you got for Siddy?
Well, let me ask you about one of the other, things that happened with the Pistons. You just kind of mentioned him, Tim Hardaway. So they pick up Tim Hardaway, and I hear people complaining about Hardaway too. And why didn't we keep Grimes because he's younger and so on and so forth? And so what are your thoughts on having acquired Hardaway and giving up Grimes?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there because, the Pistons had a chance to draft a 3-point shooter and Dalton Connect, and they passed. Mm-hmm. And instead, now we've got the 1-year patch job in Tim Hardaway Jr. Hardaway's a yo-yo. I mean, he has a lot of bad nights. So he'll have his good nights too, but he has more than his share of bad nights to offset. I would call him a grenade launcher. He is a good grenade launcher, meaning the guys that are forced to put up shots when the shot clock's running out. He can actually do that and maybe even knock some of those down. That's good. What can you say? I mean, he's a patch job, so it was a little bit. I don't know. I wasn't excited, So now somehow with Hardaway and Harris together, it seems to feel a little better having two vets, two options to throw out there. But I don't know if you noticed, ESPN gave those grades. There's Kevin Pelton. I like him. He's an interesting guy. He gave the Pistons a C- on that trade, and Dallas got an A. Because, we helped them out a lot. We allowed them to get under one of those aprons, which allowed them to use the mid-level to sign a guy, and they could start doing things. And they got a guy back. Quentin Grimes is a carbon copy of Josh Green, who makes $12 million a year. And today they packaged Josh Green. So because of the redundancy, now they got a guy making $4 million. So we helped out Dallas a lot. They got a young guy back. We got 3 second rounders, again, Tim, it's okay, I guess, for a year to have. Maybe he'll re-sign and stick around a little while, but it's not going to move the needle a lot.
Do you think Grimes is that much of a loss for the Pistons?
Well, he's interesting because he's young and he plays with good energy. He's a deep rotation, deep bench guy. So I don't see him having a big impact. But everything's related to salary. He makes $4 million, so he outperforms his contract. So that makes him valuable.
What about so one other question that you made me think of? I kind of think of now they have Harris and also Hardaway, but last year they had Burks and they had Bogdanovich. So they did have two old veterans last year. Although
I hadn't thought of that, Nick. That's a great comparison. I had not thought of that. Yeah, we're still banking a lot on these 2 or 3 guys that can shoot threes. It's not a lot, right?
Yeah. I mean, if Harris can play a little more defense, because Bogdanovich looked like he was a guy that got pushed into a swimming pool when he played defense. He flailed around quite a bit, and so
he got old. He had that injury. He had the calf injury, and he came back, and that's how you lose a half step. He went from being passable to being bad. So,
yeah.
It still seems like the Piston roster is still so liquid. It's still, you look at it, what is it? You can't figure out what it is. You got Cade, and and then after that, Duran, beef stew, okay. Then you got the 2, wings back-to-back years. We got drafted 2 guys who have the same physique, same position with Holland and Thompson, and it's still a weird roster. We still don't know what it is.
Yeah, it does. I don't know. I just kind of they still have a bunch of young guys and now a couple of older guys on the team now. It's the most of the movement has been with sort of the bottom of the bench, really, which is it's just kind of wipe.
You're referring to Bloody Saturday that I just mentioned, all those guys. Yeah.
Ironically, most of those guys he got rid of on Saturday were Weaver acquired at the trade deadline, I think with the exception of Fontecchio.
Yeah, that was, you brought up a great point. I wanted to talk about that. I think what happened post All-Star break, that was the most insulting Piston roster I've ever seen in my life. When they because think about it, 2 years ago after the deadline, they traded Saddiq Bey, they mothballed Burks and Bogdanovich, and they threw out. We were watching James Wiseman, Killian Hayes, Corey Joseph losing, 18 out of 21. It was really bad basketball. And then we come back this year, and it just got worse. Now we're stuck watching guys that were just the cast-offs and leftovers from other teams. Guys with 5 years experience, 12 years experience. You don't need these guys to come in to be evaluated. You know what they can do. It was just everybody else's roster filler and leftovers. And I remember, being on Reddit and talking to people during games, and everybody was just saying the same thing. What is this garbage? Why are we here? Why are we watching this? It was horrific. What an insult to be 4 years into this and to be subjected to that. Because, you're supposed to have hope. You're supposed to be watching prospects. You're supposed to be picking up guys that maybe can help you next year. And instead we were watching, Troy Brown Jr., etc., perform. And it was really sad. A very, very sad exit by Troy Weaver.
Well, I mean, that whole trade deadline was sort of weird because I think he literally traded probably about half of the team and got nothing in the end. Got worse players than what he gave up, which is kind of hard to do.
Yeah, we were always commenting, like, who are the 5 guys out now? It'd be Malachi Flynn and Wiseman and Troy Brown Jr. and that Evan guy from Princeton who's nobody could say his name. And it's like, what is this? And then they would just get destroyed, of course. It was pathetic. Yeah.
And Troy Weaver has gone on, of course, to the Wizards, and the Wizards are upset with him because apparently he made some moves that were they've got a bunch of centers now on their team thanks to Troy. It's really weird.
Well, he's not the GM. He's a special advisor.
But they're blaming him anyway.
Well, they brought in the new GM last year, and he immediately was battling Troy for worst GM in the league. So it's fitting that they're working together. This he's the guy who traded Porzingis and Gafford. He took on the Jordan Poole contract. He made a trade with Indy last year's draft to move up one spot. Who trades assets to move up one spot? Right. And Indy's like, oh yeah, sure, yeah, we're going to draft that guy too. And it's,
it reminds me of that draft day deal, City, when back in '79, when Dick Vitale paid the Milwaukee Bucks like $50,000 so he could take Greg Kelser, and the Bucks said, we're going to take Sidney Moncrief anyway. And of course, we know what happened with Moncrief's career versus Kelser's in the NBA.
Yeah, it was one of those deals. It's exactly what happened. So there's comedy in other front offices too. Yeah. So here we are. It feels like we're in year 1, but it's year 5.
Exactly. Let's go to Big Al now. What you got for Siddy Hall here in the Knee Jerks?
One of the best terms I heard when it comes to describing the Pistons' offense this past couple of years were, I've seen soccer riots with more offensive spacing than the Pistons' offense, and yet, and you brought it up. You leaned it. You talked about this a little bit. They've taken almost the exact same kind of player the past 2 drafts, who are hyper athletic. They say, oh, they have great basketball IQ, but they can't shoot. And even though, the new guy, Ron Holland, who played for the Ignite last year, is only 18. Do you think this is Langdon leaning into his star hire, which would be Fred Vinson, who's considered to be one of the top shooting coaches in the league? Because if any team needs an elite shooting coach, it's the Pistons, especially if these young guys he keep drafting. Hell, this even throw in like Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren because they can't shoot either.
I keep laughing about Fred Vinson. I mean, pretty soon he's going to be the highest paid individual in the whole league. He's just like, he's got this magic touch. How much is he worth? Like $500 million? I mean, if he can make everybody shoot. Like, are these coaching gurus, like these shooting gurus, that rare? I mean, someone explain that to me. Did we not have one already?
Yeah, it does seem weird. It feels like they're putting an awful lot of faith in this guy to fix several players, and that seems like a bit much.
Wave your hand like this. You know,
Yeah,
I mean,
follow through.
elbow
Yes.
in.
Yeah.
You know, I don't. What does he do?
Well,
all day? What does he
well,
do
let me
when
ask
they're
you
not
this
at the
though.
gym?
Well, to kind of follow up on this,
Let's follow the thread around all
what
day.
are your thoughts on Jalen Duren, who had a decent offensive season? He pretty much was kind of a double-double machine, but his defense, he was one of the worst in the league when it came to rim protection, help defense, that kind of thing. He just, I don't know if it's effort or basketball IQ or what. There's a lot.
Well,
there is. Well, I'll ask you this: would he be better off coming off the bench and the Pistons picking up a journeyman center in free agency?
No, don't. I mean, you can. I don't care about starting bench. I don't care.
Mhm.
It's minutes, right? Bring in a journey. Like centers are not difficult to find. There are lots of centers. Used to be every team carried 4 or 5 big men. Now it's like 2. So there are plenty of guys on the sidelines who can step in and help you if you need someone. But let's go back. Jalen Duren, if you had sat me down last October before the year started and said, look, here are Duren's numbers. This is what Duren's numbers are going to be in year 2. And I looked at the numbers, and then I started reading what everybody's saying online. There's a major, major disconnect. Jalen Duren had a good year. He's not the problem. Okay, let's just get off of that. He's in year 2. He's starting. He's learning how to play. He added new wrinkles to his game, and let's just leave it at that. You know, leave the guy alone. And they make him sound like, you know, we got to trade him and Ivy. Thank God the Piston fans are not it's not like a community GM. My God, you know, let them grow, let them be. They're fine. You know, Jaden Ivey is a tornado.
Well, let me ask you this though: isn't defense effort, and then why is Duren's defense so bad?
I can't answer that exactly.
Yeah, I think that's where people are getting upset with Duren. It's not his offense; it's his defense. And you're talking about Pistons and Pistons fans who have grown up with generations have prided themselves on the Pistons being a good defensive team, and these past few years the Pistons have been far from it. And Duren kind of plays into that because he doesn't block shots. He doesn't do anything in the paint.
Yeah, he's a rebounder. You know, he's like Andre Drummond. But he's a big physical guy. He wins the battles close to the paint, close to the basket, just like Drummond. And you know what you're talking about. All I can answer is say, he's strong enough to play the position, one of the 2 big spots. The coaching staff has to teach him schemes. You know, they got to, work with him and they got to teach. He doesn't know. You know, that's it. He's inexperienced. He's just going out there and doing the best he can. I'm a Jalen Duren supporter. I say leave the guy alone. Don't expect too much. I said a year ago, Greg Eno, you asked me, what's his potential? And I said, well, you're kind of seeing what he can do. You know, he's not going to start dribbling the ball between his legs and making spin moves. You know, it's not who he is. We just got to lower the expectations. Everybody's got the P word, potential. And then we get upset when they don't fulfill it quickly. So maybe it's our expectations is most of the problem here. Right?
Well, I mean, he is just 20 years old,
what is
too.
the way forward here?
So.
Yeah, that's true. But Siddy, what is the way forward? I mean, you mentioned a little while ago about the roster's liquid and what is it and so on and so forth. It's still weird, and that's true. And Trajan Langdon's only been here for a few weeks, but what's the way forward here? What do the Pistons need to do to get this roster a little bit back into kilter? Is it? We've talked a lot about shooting, but it can't just simply be a matter of just drafting shooters or acquiring shooters. There's got to be nuances, and guys have got to complement each other. What's the way forward from 14 wins to respectability in today's NBA?
Well, I'm going to give you a stat answer. I mean, they're not good at anything. They got to, when I say anything, shooting the ball, defending the ball, rebounding, turnovers, all these different statistical areas, I mean, they're all negatives. So what I do like about this team is that I think even though they're young, I think collectively they have a lot of players that have toughness. Beef Stew's tough. Thompson is a very tough guy. He stepped on the NBA floor immediately. He's ready to fight with anybody. Jaden Ivey's a tornado. Duran's a big, strong guy. Holland, is big for his position. They have a chance to be a physically tough team. And I think in today's NBA, that's the way you play defense. Defense is now played out on the perimeter. It's not just, guarding the basket anymore with twin towers. If you look at Milwaukee, their defensive numbers just collapsed last year with the departure of Jrue Holiday. It was a point guard, and that was unthinkable in the past. It was all about twin towers. They have they have Brook Lopez and Giannis. My God, you can't do any better than that.
Right.
And they finished 20th in defense. And the teams that are improving in defense a lot of the teams are ones with big physical perimeter guys. Dylan Brooks went to Houston and their defense improved drastically. San Antonio at the 4th pick drafted a guy who can't shoot. This Stephon Castle, but he's 6'7", 6'8", and he can bang heads. And they're going to have him and, Wemby anchoring a defense. I think teams are finally figuring that out. So in that respect, I think Detroit has some things in place. Now it's up for the coach. The coach has the difficult part of trying to make these weird gears fit together that maybe aren't built that way. And again, in today's NBA, it's 3-point shooting. They're just so bad at it. And we're entering the year with just it seems like the minimum amount of 3-point shooting that you can have. But anyway, let me just throw some numbers at you, though. I'm always on here as a stat guru, and I never talk about stats. So let me just throw some numbers at you. Consider this. Let me start with a question. What is the number one way of predicting the winner in a game? And by that, I mean, if you remember, many, many years ago, home court was worth a lot. Home teams used to win like 70% or 75%. So maybe, back in the day, home court was the most important, factor in predicting the winner of a game.
Yeah.
Right? It's not true anymore. So I just want to kind of throw it out there, a guess. What do you think is the most important factor, statistically speaking, in predicting winner outcomes of games?
I'm going to guess the team that gets the most possessions.
I'll throw out there, I think the team that has who comes in with the better 3-point shooting percentage.
Okay.
And just to be different, I'll say turnovers.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, those are all good answers. Now, my answer is a little bit more broad. I'm going to say overall shooting. Overall shooting dominates. So you have, your 3-pointers, your 2-pointers, your free throws. You have to weigh them accordingly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, so last year, I'm just looking at league numbers. I have, the tools to measure these things. Last year, teams that had, the advantage in shooting. And then let's clarify too. How do you win if you don't shoot the ball better than your opponent? You do it by taking more shots, rebounding, turnovers. Okay. So it's shots taken or, shooting efficiency, right? So shooting efficiency numbers. Last year, the team with the best overall shooting won 88.7% of their games. Right? Mm-hmm. Now, if you were to measure the differential between the two teams, if one team has a 10-point advantage or better in terms of shooting efficiency, which also means that to lose, like let's say you have a 12-point advantage, well, you lose when the other team gets 13 more shots to compensate. So if you have a 10-point advantage or better, those teams won last year 97.6% of the time. And then you say, well, how often does that happen? Well, 57% of the time. More than half the games, one team has at least a 10-point edge in shooting, and they win 97.6% of the time. Let's talk about
is free throw shooting included in that mix, or are you strictly talking about shooting from
everything,
field?
all the shooting combined into one number? Okay,
So
the Pistons last year. So again, when you have the edge, about 89% of the time you win,
right,
which is a little bit higher than normal, but that's how it worked out last year. The Pistons last year, when they had a deficit, when the other team shot the ball better, the Pistons were 0-58. There was not one time where they could create the extra opportunities to compensate for a shooting deficit. Then, when they did have an advantage, 14-10. So it tells you everything. One, they don't have a shooting advantage very often.
Right.
Two, they get killed in either turnovers or rebounding or both.
Right.
And three, basically for them to win, they need at least a 10-point advantage in shooting. Well, that's kind of hard to do when you can't shoot threes.
Or when you're turning the ball over.
Well, I'm just talking about shooting efficiency, right?
Yeah. But I mean, in order to get those extra shots, you can't be turning the ball over either. Right?
So I think Siddy froze.
Uh-oh.
Too many numbers. Oh,
What?
there he is.
There he is.
He's back.
Did I disappear?
He froze for a minute.
Just for a few seconds.
Okay. With a funny face?
Always.
Okay.
Yeah,
anyway.
I'll make that. Yeah, I'll make that the thumbnail. Yeah,
Right.
All right. So last year, when the Pistons had at least a 10-point shooting advantage in terms of shooting efficiency, they went 6-1. So just 7 times.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't have a 9.76 winning percentage. They went 7-1. Then when they had a smaller advantage, like 1 point to 9 point, teams normally win 76, about 3/4 of the time. The Pistons went 8-9. So there it is, man. I mean, they just did everything wrong. They couldn't rebound. They turned the ball over. They shot poorly. I mean, they bottomed out, man. That's how you go 14-68.
One of the things I kind of said it jokingly, but watching enough Pistons games, it seems like there was some random quarter where the other team gets up like 20 to 30 points on them, and then they maintain, like a 20-point deficit for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
So, but there's always one quarter where they collapse, and that's it.
They couldn't compete for 48 minutes. I mean, they just didn't have it. They could compete for 24, 36, but not 48. It was, there's 100 possessions going each way. It's a lot, and you get that separation. And, and one thing too, to remember, that 14-68 record, part of that came because of the NBA's new rule about the good players staying in the lineups. They put pressure on the teams. No more sitting guys all the time and sitting them 20 or 25 games of the year. So what used to be games where teams would see Detroit coming and they might sit 1 or 2 of their good guys, that wasn't happening. So they had to go up. The league is stocked. Every team has lots of talent, and they just weren't getting any gimmies.
So is it possible then you would say that the year they won 17 or even 20 or 21 games, they could have been a 14-win team had other teams played their stars the whole time?
Maybe. Well, that
we're losing him.
there
he is.
You're losing me? Am I back? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, possibly, Nick. Yeah, I guess it's possible. So, Yeah, 28 game. They had that 28 game losing streak. I mean, that would not have happened 2 years ago with teams sitting their stars. You know, somewhere they would have broken through and picked up a W. But that's that. Anyway, they have a lot of. Think about it this way, though. What I was saying about just the turnovers and rebounding and how bad they were at it, just by improving that and being like average in terms of possession of the basketball. If they were just to do that, they're going to pick up 8 wins just from that. So that
okay.
And and here's another important point too. Being the stat guru, I don't want to let you down. Last year, the Pistons, they only won 3 games in the first half of the season. Then they won 11. And that is, a 367% increase. So I got out my space age Texas Instrument calculator and, extrapolated. And if the Pistons can continue on that sharp meteoric rise, they're going to win 40 games in the first half of next year.
There you go.
Did I mention it's irrational exuberance show?
Yeah.
They're going 40-1 to start out.
In case you missed that, yeah. We're talking
That sounds
City
more
Hall.
like a social media logic, to be honest.
Talking with Siddy Hall and the Nitrix. Let's bring Big Al in for another one. What you got for City?
Well, let me ask you this. Is there a franchise out there you'd like to see the Pistons actually model themselves after? In some ways, it feels like right now they're trying to become the Pelicans North with all the with Langton, and he's brought over a bunch of the front office guys. But are there any NBA teams out there right now you like that you see? Do you like how they're building, how they're how OKC has moved forward, or Orlando, or look at Boston now won the title. What teams should the Pistons be modeling themselves after, or what franchises do you like the way they're moving forward?
Well, I often compare them to Orlando because they had like the same record not that long ago. Orlando was 5-20 the year before last, and then they turned the corner. But, you have to look back. What's different about this Detroit team and most teams? And one of the root causes, if you go back to the Joe Dumars' final 4 years, year after year after year, the Pistons have players that they cannot flip for value. The Orlando, they went through a rebuild. They had Dwight Howard. They were able to turn him into something, and they were able to flip Vucevic with Chicago. So they had something to start with. And for many years, Orlando was, using these first rounders, and everybody was just kind of like, eh. Well, those guys are now like the support players, the role players, the bench players, Jonathan Isaac and these other guys. And then they finally turned it around. They had back-to-back solid picks with Franz Wagner and Banchero and Jalen Suggs. And those 3 guys blossomed together, and it came together. And they have an identity. They're a defensive team. They had the number 2 defense in the league. They just added KCP. They're focused on defense. That's who I could kind of see Detroit becoming. But what worries me is that just not having that starting point of having some pieces in place. Weaver, just throwing away Kennard, throwing away Bruce Brown, throwing away Bay. It ain't a lot, but those are support pieces, just like the guys that Orlando has. And if those guys if we don't get those pieces in place, we could start seeing a second, wave of a rebuild, just like Orlando traded Aaron Gordon, and they had to go through it again. That's a long process. So what I'm wondering is if Detroit's going to have to do that down the road and go through phase 2 of, trading the pieces that they've, drafted, basically.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, that would mean trading Cade Cunningham, wouldn't it?
Possibly, yeah. He would bring a lot, right?
Yeah, he's about the only one, and it's funny. Him and the other guy who I think has any kind of major value right now would be Beef Stew, because he'd obviously be a rotational big on a playoff team. Other than that, you'd be selling low on pretty much anybody on this roster.
I think they have a lot of trade. I think they have about 6 guys with trade. All those young guys have trade value, except for Sasser's is kind of limited.
Right.
Who's worth a lot? I mean, what is Beef Stew worth? I don't know what he's worth. Is he worth a first? First rounders are tough to get now. They cost a lot more than they used to.
Yeah.
Unless you have a stud, then you get 2 or 3 of them or 4 of them. Like what just happened with Mikal Bridges. My God, what is it? 4 first, 5 first?
It was
insane.
5, I believe. Yeah, it was crazy.
That was just insane. And he's not even. I don't. Everyone loves him. I'm a little bit cooler on him than most people. I thought that was an overpay, but whatever.
The league, with any sports league, not just the NBA, teams are going to age out. I mean, that's why it's always so impressive when certain teams can always seem to stay in the upper echelon, no matter what. Because that's hard to do. Is part of the path forward for the Pistons to just as they're rejiggering the roster and as they're getting better and so forth, will the rest of the Eastern Conference, is there a hope that some of those teams that are at the top of the heap right now, Boston, Miami, Milwaukee, Philly, and so forth, is there hope for the Pistons fans that those teams may kind of eventually in the next 3 to 5 years just kind of age out, that their windows of being great will finally close, and the changing of the guard, we'll see a changing the guard where maybe the Orlando Magic are a player now in the East and other teams? Is that possible that we'll just see some of these teams just get old, or or am I just being delusional?
Well, teams, they flip their assets quickly now. They don't wait very long. Look at Utah with Gobert and Donovan Mitchell.
Right.
As soon as they smell a problem, people are surprised about Chicago. Like, they haven't done that. They had, team that's kind of stuck in the middle. By the way, it's kind of funny about being stuck in the middle. For how many years have we heard fans saying the worst place to be is in the middle, right? Being at the edge of the playoffs, you have no chance of winning, bad draft position.
Right.
And now suddenly, everyone saw Houston jump to 500 last year, and now it looks good. The middle looks okay, right?
Right.
I guess you got to pass through it to climb higher, right? But to answer your question, things move quickly in today's NBA. That's how, they changed that CBA. They keep changing it through the years. That's what the league wants. They want parity, and teams are, playing salary cap all the time and trying to figure out when you pull the plug. They pull it at a much different time than we used to. They used to age out. Aging out now, it can happen, but it's not as common as it used to be. Now you sell your big assets before it gets old, when you sense that there's no chance left. Like Giannis, maybe at some point that seems like a good candidate of a team that would end up, they've got kind of some old guys around him. The talent seems a little limited.
Right.
Maybe that's the team that would flip it really quickly and go take a dive to the bottom.
Right.
So
good enough. Well, Siddy, good stuff as usual. We appreciate the visit. Always fun to have you, and especially when there's lots of stuff to talk about like there was tonight. We probably could have gone a lot longer, but I think we hit all the major talking points. And is there anything you wanted to leave us with before you go?
Ron Holland. We didn't take votes. Let's get everyone's opinion. Ron Holland, really quick. Is he thumbs up, thumbs down, or in between?
Well, I'm going to say that, and I don't mean to talk over Nick, because I'm going to kind of steal what Nick had said. We were chatting about this privately. He said, look, I'm not going to get too crazy, and I agree with him. He said, I'm not going to get too crazy about this, because the Pistons are at such a point now where one kid being drafted wasn't going to make much of a difference anyway, and maybe the new regime can develop him. So I'm hearing a lot of good things about him, other than the shooting, which could improve. So I guess I'm kind of 2/3 thumbs up.
Okay. Guardedly optimistic.
Yes, exactly.
Thumbs down. I wanted a shooter.
You wanted Dalton Connect?
Someone of that ilk, yes. I want someone who a bucket getter and not just the slasher type. Someone who could shoot from 3, which the Pistons desperately need. Luke Kennard. of a few years
Yeah.
ago would have actually been a great pick. But I wanted a shooter. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah, I'm with you, Al. I wanted Connect from Tennessee, but I'm withholding judgment on
Yeah.
Holland. One thing you notice about him coming out of high school, he was the number 2 rated prospect, and the consensus of this draft, he had dropped to 9. So his value did drop since coming out of high school. He has an NBA body, so that reduces risk. What I noticed looking at film, I don't see what he's great at. I think his shooting actually can come around. He really is going to need a 3-point shot, but I don't know if he has that X factor, that special ingredient like Asar Thompson does. He's a special guy. Can't shoot a lick, but there's just something special about him. And Holland, to me, looks a little bit more boilerplate, but let's see what happens. It's really hard to make projections accurately.
Yeah, and I would add that he played for the Ignite, and the Ignite were a train wreck. And I think it's hard for anybody to look good on that team.
Yeah, and I'm glad they did not take his teammate. I was not excited about Buzelis. I'm glad they passed on him. So Holland, we'll see. I'm kind of neutral, but hoping for the best.
Right, and Nick, you got to add your opinion. What do you think on this pick?
I'm kind of neutral on it too. I have no idea what to think about a 19-year-old other than what the Pistons need is another rookie on this team and another project. So okay, he's got some strengths, but if the guy can't shoot, now you got to fix that, which is one of the most fundamental things you have to be able to do in the NBA. So I'm kind of tired of these projects. You could have 1 or 2 projects on the team, but when 4 of your 5 starters are projects of some kind, it's you're basically the Detroit Tigers of basketball. So who knows? I hope they can develop him, but you can't have too many players at once in development and expect to do anything.
Yeah, and 2 play the same position, right?
Yep.
Well, I'm concerned. People talk about his shooting all the time. Holland, I'm concerned about his ball handling and driving. I'm not impressed from what I've seen. There's something missing there. I think his shooting can get fixed, but he likes to put the ball on the floor. He dribbles into trouble, loses the handle, straight line drives, just crashing into people. Not a lot of finesse there. So I don't know if that's fixable.
We'll see. We shall see. It's still 3 months away from the opening tip of the new season, and I'm sure lots of things can happen with the roster that we don't know about. That's going to happen between now and then, which leads me to my next statement, which is we'll like to bring you back, Siddy, as we are ready to tip off the next NBA season once the roster is set, all the moves have been made, and the teams are ready to draw back the curtain and start another season.
I will be anxiously awaiting the invite.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome.
We appreciate this. Thanks for being here, and good luck, my friend. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Right.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Siddy.
All right. Thanks, Siddy.
So long.
All right, that was Siddy Hall, our NBA stats guru, who always has a lot to say. So, Greg, I guess it's time for question 2 of the birthday game.
It is time for question 2 of the
Yes.
birthday game. Born on this date in 1941, played his entire career with an original 6 team, is in the Hall of Fame. Part of the famous gag line of the 1970s. I guess you could call him Mr. Ranger. In fact, he is called Mr. Ranger.
Oh, God. This is something I should know. Played his entire career with the Rangers. Oh, God.
I have no idea. Before my time on this one, I have no idea.
Yeah, Nick always likes to rub it in how much younger that he is than us. So. if Greg comes up with a question, Nick, I'm too young for that one. So.
It's my way of getting around how clueless I feel. So.
Oh, God. Oh, shoot. You know what? God, no, there's names probably on the tip of my tongue, but I can't think of it, Greg. I'm going to have to pass and I guess
Wow.
I will have to run to the party store instead to get my tobacco.
I guess so.
So yeah.
Okay.
All right. So we'll get to question 3 shortly because we got a few minutes left before we have to wrap things up. So we do need to touch on, guys, is we have a little bit of time, is what the Red Wings did today. Today was the first day of, well, actually the draft was this last week, but I think the big news has been not so much a draft because the kids they pick, we're not going to see them for at least a couple of years. But free agency started today. The Wings made some moves prior to free agency that seemed weird and questionable. And then today went kind of like, was meh, I guess. And now the question out there is, are they worse? Max Boltman, who is probably easily the best Wings beat writer in Detroit, he writes for The Athletic, actually published tonight essentially saying the Wings are going to be a worse team next year, as if things stand the way they are. So first off, let's Jake Wallman. Greg, Nick, what the hell was this Wallman a year ago? People were raving about Jake Wallman, how he was a nice offensive pairing with Mo Seider. And then a year later, he seemed to become completely out of favor with the team and was essentially given away to the Sharks. They actually had to trade a second-round pick to get rid of him and supposedly open up $3.4 million in cap room. That whole thing, Greg, to me sounds like there was more going on than the Wings want to let on when it comes to Wallman falling out with the team.
Yeah, I did not know this. I found this out a couple of days ago because it was indeed very odd to a lot of folks who follow the Red Wings. And somebody had said, and I hate to give a lot of credence to these kinds of things, but it seemed like it made sense because other people were agreeing that apparently when the Red Wings were on their last West Coast trip, the last one, that Wallman had posted on social media something to the effect of, "Oh, I'm on vacation now," or something, because he had posted a picture of some beautiful setting out on the West Coast somewhere, and he made some reference to being on vacation, and he was told to take it down by the Red Wings, and he did. This is not substantiated or confirmed, but it's been reported by more than one person that did not go over well with the Red Wings. Now, there's been also talk that there were just some nights where Wallman just took the night off, and so I don't know if that had anything to do with the essential giving him away and not even giving him away to the Sharks, but kind of adding a sweetener in that deal as well. And the Sharks, of course, are the worst team in the league.
And supposedly they didn't even shop him. They just said, they offered him the Sharks. Yeah.
And so, ultimately the Wings are not, the Wallman thing isn't going to make a difference next year one way or the other, really. I mean, it's not like that, but it was odd. It was strange. I mean, for sure. I mean, he wasn't a bench sitter. I mean, he was in the rotation, so it wasn't like this is some guy that only played 30 games or something. So it did make some people scratch their heads, but whatever. I mean, Yzerman has done this before. He's gotten rid of guys who have had issues, and he just does it. He doesn't, try to explain it away, or he lets everybody else do that. He just goes ahead and does it. So, yeah, it was odd. But I think what the fan base, Al, is reason there's some consternation is because this is day one of free agency, and the Red Wings have lost way more players than they've gained. Yeah. I mean, they've lost Perron, they've lost Gostisbehere, looks like, to Carolina. They lost out on Stamkos. Now they did re-sign Kane, that's true, for 1 year. They did get Cam Talbot for some goaltending depth, that's true. But it's like you said, it's been less than overwhelming, and I don't know what people were expecting necessarily out of this organization, but I think they expected more than what has happened.
Yeah, and Nick, the Kane thing, I think, shocked everybody. I don't think anybody expected him to sign essentially a below-market deal, let alone for just 1 year. Right. Especially with the bonuses involved, most of them are fairly easy to get. He gets $1.5 million for just being in 10 games, for example. So which all of a sudden that $4 million contract's closer to $6 million. But it kind of feels like, to me, I don't know how you feel like this, is a 1 year deal is, if the Wings aren't in playoff contention, he's going to get traded.
That could very well be. I was surprised he only got a 1-year deal. I thought he'd get 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
But did not, which kind of tells you there's either something wrong with him. There's no market for him for some reason. Or he's banking on padding his numbers this year, and then hoping to cash in next year, maybe.
Right.
Maybe people thought, okay, he played like a half a year last year, maybe a little more than half a season. What's the, prove it that you can still play. Yeah. So, who knows? Or, they didn't want to pay him. They were going to go for somebody younger and then who's had better numbers in free agency as well. So it could be that too. Because what is he now? 36, 37? Is he 36, 37 years old now?
35
I think that's
right now.
35. He's 35 right now. So he's 35, 36.
I think he'll be 36 during the course of next season. Yeah.
Okay. So he's 36. You're going to pay a 36-year-old, how much money versus somebody younger that you may want to give 3 or 4 years to, and spread out money over multiple years. I mean, it could be that too. It's just he's not worth it to a lot of teams, perhaps. So, but they got him. I'm kind of lukewarm on him. We had talked with Keith Gabe about, what happened to Kane when Larkin got injured,
right.
Good point.
It just kind of he disappeared. DeBrincat disappeared.
Yep.
So could the Wings be worse? And to the other question of could the Wings be worse? Yeah, they could be. But how big of a scoring impact was Perron last year? It wasn't that big, actually. I don't think he was. And they're bringing in, I think, a couple of rookies who may do well. DeBrincat, can he do well? Is Patrick Kane going to be doing well over the course of 80 games versus whatever 50? I think he played 50 last year.
Yeah, right.
So who knows? Honestly, who really knows? I worry more about their defense because his defense could be okay, or then it could just take a night off at the wrong night. So who knows? It's hard to say whether the Wings will be better or worse. Honestly.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is hard to say. And Perron, he was more of a glue guy. I mean, one of these good locker room guys, dressing room guys. And that's fine, but he's not young either. And there were nights I thought he was a step slow. So I'm not, I mean, it's the optics. I think a lot of this stuff is optics. Fans are always very reactionary and they see the roster being, I just tweeted out, it seems like the rest of the league is picking apart the Red Wings roster today. And all they've done is re-sign Kane for 1 year and picked up Cam Talbot essentially. But Steve Yzerman did say that, hey, I can't pay everybody. He's still got to find money for Mo Sider. He's got to find money for Lucas Raymond. You got to keep those guys. I mean,
let's follow up on that. How come those guys have not been signed yet? They've been eligible for a contract for a year at this point. And now there's question, is it going to be a bridge contract or is it going to be long term? Yeah. And you have to wonder if some of Yzerman's decision making was affected by, I don't know how much I'm going to end up paying these guys. Yeah. So I have to kind of scale back what I do today.
Well, I think if you look back, though, at Yzerman, he has always done this. He has never signed guys internally who we thought should be signed. He's never really jumped the gun on that. He's always been kind of dragging things out, kind of did it a little bit with Larkin. He's, did it with Kane. He had all summer to negotiate with Kane. I finally did. I mean, finally had signed him for sure. And that was probably, that was maybe some Yzerman magic there, but he's always been that way. He's always been very deliberate. I have no doubt that he will pay these two kids, Sider and Raymond. I mean, no question. Now, as to why he hasn't done it yet, I don't know. You must have some reason why he hasn't, but there's no way he's going to let those two guys go. Absolutely no way. They are the two of the, with Larkin, of course, two of the three guys that you absolutely have to keep on this team if they're going to do anything. So, but he's always been that way, Al. He's always been very deliberate, and it's just the way he is.
Well, Nick, could you think he's getting to the point where it might be too deliberate? Because I remember when Ken Holland said a rebuild could take up to 10 years, and everybody laughed.
Right.
And now here we are, at least 5 years into Yzerman's tenure.
Right.
And they don't look like anywhere near a cup contender yet. We're probably talking 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if one of the factors here is that you want to have enough core guys around the same age that kind of like peak at the same time.
Right.
And that takes time to like synchronize guys like that. Plus, you also have to think about the cap. He has to deal with a cap all the time, and and the NHL cap is different from the NBA cap is different from NFL. So, if you commit a lot of money to one guy, that could be like a real flop. I mean, I think Holland. I remember when they finally said, okay, the Wings lost their touch when Holland went after a couple guys, dumped a bunch of money at a couple of free agents that ended up going with the Wild.
Yeah.
And he said, Paris and I don't know what other guy. He didn't sign those guys, but he probably dodged a bullet. These are like long-term heavy contracts.
Jack Parise
and they never
Shea Weber, although Shea Weber's in the Hall of Fame, believe it or not. But
so you just kind of have to be careful. Like even with like Stamkos, he signed with the Predators, I think.
Yeah.
And his was like $8 million a year. Do you want to commit $8 million a year to Stamkos?
4 years.
Maybe
for 4 years. 4 years too. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's right. And I don't know how old he's somewhere in his 30s as well. I don't know how old he is, but
36, something like that. He'll be pushing 40 at the end of that contract.
Why would the Wings give him that? Honestly. They can't then commit to a lot of other young guys. What if some of his other young guys blossom? What if he needs help, on some other, at some other position? I don't think they're at the point where they should be committing like, $9 million a year for each of 4 years, to a 36-year-old. So even if it is Stamkos.
Yeah. And to follow up on that, I'll go to you, Greg. The other star veteran that was being thrown out there was Jacob Kruba, the defenseman for the captain of the New York Rangers. And there was a lot of talk that the Wings was going to be that he's going to get traded, and the favorite was the Red Wings. And that seems to have cooled, but he's 30 years old, is coming off kind of a down year, still a good player. If the Rangers, as it was originally put out there, that the Rangers were going to pay like $2.5 million of his $8 million contract or so. A $5.5 million of 2 years of Jacob Trouba does not sound like a bad thing. The problem would be, what would you have to trade to get him? And I think that might ultimately have been the sticking point, because it really felt like the Wings were targeting Trouba and Stamkos, and they went 0-2.
Well, I'm as far as Stamkos goes, that would have been one of those things that would have really jazzed the fan base up for sure. I mean, there's no question about that. That would have made the Patrick Kane thing look like nothing, to be honest with you. But to Nick's point, 4 at 8, I don't know that the Red Wings are at that point. I know I sound like freaking Scott Harris when I say that, but I don't know if the Red Wings are at that point.
You're going to set off Nick if you keep bringing up Scott Harris. I'm sorry.
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, Stamkos is a Hall of Famer. We know that, as is Kane. I get it. I don't know how many bullets are left in the gun, though, with either of those guys. To be honest with you, I mean, the thing that scares me about players like that is that their fall from grace can be so rapid and so sudden. They can all of a sudden they're a 15-goal scorer just like that.
Right.
And I'm not saying that would happen with guys. These are generational talents. These are guys that are probably not. They're probably in a different conversation than a lot of these other players that I'm talking about. but still, it can happen to the best of them. I mean, it really can. And even Stamkos, if you look at his numbers in Tampa, he's not and he shouldn't be the Stamkos of 5 years ago. I'm not expecting him to be, but you extrapolate him out to 2028 when he's 40 years old. I don't know. Now, as far as what was your other part of the question? Right. Now that would have been intriguing. The Red Wings we all know the Red Wings need defense. How often do you trade for a captain of another team? The Rangers fans, I was kind of paying attention to this over the weekend. The Rangers fans were more on the side of they don't want to lose him. There were a few folks that were like, good rids. You're always going to get that, of course. A lot of the fans were like, I hate to see him go. They were always almost kind of talking about it in the past tense. Because like you said, the rumors about him going to Detroit were really hot. Very hot Saturday and Sunday. Like my stepbrother texted me and said, "Is this true?" He gave me a link to the story. I said, "Yeah, I think it is." I said, "It's being reported by several sources. Could happen today or tomorrow." But like you said, Al, it's kind of cooled. Doesn't mean it won't happen. But I think that would be a good get. I think if Yzerman can fit him into the budget, that would be a good get. They can use all the help they can get on the blue line. And when you talk about a guy who's the captain of a team that went to the Eastern Conference Finals, he's not a bum.
Yeah. And Nick, is this team worse than? Are you anticipating a Red Wings team that will actually have a worse record next year?
No, not necessarily. Like I said, they have like holes they need to fix. Can their goaltending be a little more consistent than it was last year? That would help, because remember they had moments of where they were like unbeatable. Then they had moments like when Larkin went down, like
all of February, essentially.
I mean, they became the Pistons. They might as well have been the Pistons. So, can you be a little, less sort of mercurial as a team? That's one thing. But did they lose a lot? I don't know. I don't think so. Not necessarily. Not enough to really make that much of a difference.
Sure. Yeah.
One of the other things too is, even though they didn't trade for this Trouba guy, do you remember last year when there was talk of getting DeBrincat in here, and it just kind of like took forever. It wasn't something like Yzerman pulled the trigger on just like in a blink of an eye. He let it take time. And so then it happened. So this could happen, or he could pull something else off. Like, who knows? There's still a lot of time before the season starts. So there's time to trade. There's time to sign.
Yeah.
Like who knows who else becomes available? And, they could, the Wallman thing could be, I don't know about this thing about his attitude in a locker room or any of this, vacation thing he posted. This is the first I've heard of it, so I don't have any comment on that. But it was kind of a weird trade. So, does Yzerman have a plan in mind, like a reason why he really did this? Or he was anticipating something. So who knows? He's pretty quiet about it, and you kind of have a general idea of where he wants to go, and he kind of emphasizes something this week, but he doesn't show his cards, and he doesn't necessarily rush to do everything on the first day. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
And kind of to wrap this up, Greg, I don't know about you, but I'm starting to at least lose a little bit of, maybe a lot of faith in the so-called Yzer plan, because if Ken Holland was in the same situation that Steve Yzerman is now, his seat would be boiling. Yet when you go online and you see people saying, you got to be patient. He's got a plan. I'm beginning to wonder that, that people are so confident he's going to recreate the Tampa Bay Lightning. I don't see that right now. And these people are banking a hell of a lot on the kids down in Grand Rapids, who still, for the most part, have yet to see an NHL game. So I'm seeing cracks in the Yzer plan, and I think if it was anybody else, we would be talking hot seat.
I think the best First of all, you're right. That's the first. I'll say that number one. You are right about if there was anybody else, he'd be in the hot seat. But the comparison that I think is, to me, very obvious is Joe Dumars.
Yeah.
Joe Dumars had a lot of cash as a player with the Pistons. He was not maybe the same level of legend as Yzerman was, but he was a champion, two-time champion with the Pistons, running mate of Isaiah, the whole 9 yards. Kind of Isaiah talked his way out of a role at the Pistons, and Joe kind of fell into his lap. And Joe was very successful, of course, immediately. He was very successful his first 4 years on the job. And then the last 5 were longer than 5, not so great. And it all started with, to me, the trade of Chauncey Billups for Allen Iverson, which to this day I'll never understand. Well, eventually, to your point, Joe's welcome got worn out. Now, part of that was because there was ownership change. Yes, that's true. There was an ownership change with the Pistons, which didn't help him. That's for sure. But he was every bit as close to Bill Davidson and his family as Yzerman is to the Ilitch family. But eventually things, he ran out of time. Joe did. And by the time he did leave, there were a lot of people who were very disillusioned with what Joe was doing, much as what you're referencing with Yzerman. You're probably still in the minority, Al, but
I'm where I am. Yeah.
But I will say this: you are less in the minority now than you were last year at this time. I think there's a little chink. There are chinks in the armor now, and that's fair. You know what? If you asked him, Yzerman, if that's fair, he'd say yes.
Oh yeah,
he'd say yes. He's not going to pretend to be. He's never pretended to be some, beyond reproach, beyond criticism. He would absolutely agree with you that if he was sitting in your seat, that he would be having some questions. It's fair.
Yeah.
And I think what you've expressed in the past is frustration with those who refuse to acknowledge that there are chinks in the armor.
Yeah, exactly. Too often I see from Red Wings fans, they just shout down anybody who isn't fully sold on the Yzer plan. Right. And another year or two, like I said, I think that vocal minority. Like I said, this could all change if the Wings show more, especially if the kids actually show progress this year.
But the Wings
I'll be sold more on it.
Well, but the flip side of that is the Wings have been getting better incrementally. If you just look at points.
Oh yeah, very very slowly, like 5 points a year or something like that.
I mean, they haven't taken a dip, So, but this might be. I think we're at the point now, though. I think we're at the point now where this you've said it before many times on this program that rebuilds are not linear, and you're right.
Yeah.
This might be that, if you plot a rebuild and you see all this ascension, and there's oftentimes there's that little dip back down before there's another ascension. It wouldn't surprise me if I think they got 95, 96 points last year, 94, whatever it was. Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me if they dipped to maybe 90 or 89, 88, and then maybe the year after that hit 100. I mean, I think they're at that point now where and it's like people don't want to hear this, but we may see, because we're at that point now where some of the kids that he's bringing into the roster, onto the Red Wings roster, need a little bit of time, and we've seen it with losing glue guys, vets like Perron, Gostis there, losing out on getting Stamkos, who would have helped. Those are guys that. Now, they did sign Eric Gustafson. This just came through the wire. Eric Gustafson, a 2-year contract, defenseman for the Rangers, like 72 games last year. But
a poor man's gas this year, essentially.
Yeah. So there is right. So, but we're at that point now where it could happen, because when you get to that 94, 95 point area, it's easy to go one way or the other. You're probably going to go one way or the other. And I don't think the Red Wings are a team that's going to ascend to 100 points next year. I don't think so.
Right. All right. With that, I think we need to start hitting the home stretch here. So I guess, Greg, let's play question 3 of the birthday game. This should be the gimme, but I'm beginning to wonder.
Yeah, well, he's Mr. Ranger. He played on the goal game line with Vic Hadfield and Jean Rattel. He was born in Montreal. He wore number 7. He's a god in New York. Passed away in 2021. What else can I say? My goodness.
I'm sure Nick's just going to wave the white flag because he's a kid.
I have no idea on this one.
Honestly, Greg, I'm drawing a blank. So, what is the answer?
Yeah, the answer is Rod Gilbert.
Rod Gilbert. Oh my goodness, yeah, Rod Gilbert.
I've heard the name. Like, that's it. Like, I have no idea.
Sometimes it happens.
Yeah, it does. Sometimes we get stumped.
That's right.
Yes. All right. I guess now time to name our jerk of the week. Greg, why don't you go ahead?
Well, I'm a little bit leery of doing this because it hasn't been officially reported. At least in the sense that the Detroit dailies haven't run this, and it's not. I haven't really seen it. I haven't seen it really anywhere except on some social media posts. But it appears that our Tigers Tigers color announcer Greg Monroe is in a heap of trouble.
Yep.
Vis-a-vis sexual abuse, trafficking, and a whole host of nasty stuff with this young woman who was at the time that this happened, 12 years old, I believe, when this stuff first happened. I'm not going to get into the details, but you can find it on Motor City Kitties on the Reddit subreddit there. It is nasty stuff. And I don't, and this is coinciding with Monroe's absence from the booth, which I think was like June 7th or 8th was his last game. Haven't seen him since. The Tigers either the Tigers or Bally Sports released a terse, very brief statement about just something to the fact Craig Monroe is dealing with something personal. Further questions can be referred to Craig. That was it. That was all they said.
Yeah.
And this is really giving me the creeps. And if this is anywhere near true, this is one of the worst things I've heard. It's going to make some of the stuff I've heard about, like Sheldon Kennedy and guys like that, seem like nothing compared to what this girl went through with Craig Monroe. And unfortunately, she kind of she did name Joel Zamaya in this. Yeah. And she also mentioned, quote unquote, colleagues of his, Monroe's, on the 2006 Tigers, which really gives me the creeps. Right. So I hope to goodness that this is as bad as it's going to get. We're not going to hear weird things about Zumaya and other players, because if this is anywhere near true, this is one of the worst things I've ever heard in relation to sports.
Yeah, you can't even joke about something like this.
No.
It's awful, and it's not like Craig Monroe has had a clean history. I mean,
no.
I remember Nick brought this up in our text chat about. He had that shoplifting scandal about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, something like that. So he seems to have issues. We'll just leave it at that. And after what the Bally Sports went through with the Rod Allen Mario Pemba breakup, I don't think they're pretty much on a zero tolerance thing when it comes to any kind of controversy there. So that's a good call. And honestly, it would never bother me if we never saw Craig Monroe on TV again. Nick, your jerk of the week, please.
I'm going to go with former Raiders great and number one pick and probably the biggest bust of all, Jamarcus Russell, if you remember that name.
Oh, yeah.
So apparently he was a volunteer coach at his old high school alma mater, and they were trying to raise money for a new weight room. And one I think alumni or from local businesses, and one local businessman I think donated $74,000 and gave the check to Jamarcus Russell, who deposited in his bank account and then withdrew $55,000 of that. So now it's in some kind of shit show. Courts, people are suing people, but this guy basically stole, did a small time Brett Favre type ripoff. So he's my jerk of the week.
Oh, wow. I didn't hear about that one.
Yeah, I did hear something in the headline about some sort of malfeasance with money when it came to him. I guess it's not surprising, Nick, because that's essentially he got that big first round contract from the Raiders, and then he admits he didn't do anything. He slacked off because he was happy with the money he had gotten. So, my God, yep, exactly. All right, I was wondering where I was going to go with my jerk of the week. I almost went with Justin Henry Malloy for that ridiculous slide yesterday, where he on his inside the park home run. that was one of the face plants of all face plants. But
right.
Seriously though, my jerk of the week is going to be the LA Lakers and LeBron James for making a nepo baby out of Bronny James by drafting him in the second round. And this is nothing against Bronny James. He is not an NBA player. If he was a rotation guard, an undersized, below average shooting rotation guard on a below average Division I team, UCLA. He was not. And you put any other kid into the draft mix with his numbers and his you take away the pedigree, you take away the last name. He's not even getting a G League sniff. He's probably not even getting a sniff overseas. But since he's LeBron James's kid, he gets drafted in the second round. And and it's not so much that I'm not putting it on James because LeBron James, I should say. He wants to play in the NBA. He put his name in the draft, and LeBron twisted the arm of the Lakers. Why else would they hire JJ Redick, who've no experience, as their podcaster? Ex-player podcaster as their new head coach, just to make LeBron happy. Well, this is just more of making LeBron happy. The problem is with this. I think this puts Bronny in an awful position because can you just see what's going to happen if he even gets into any NBA games next year? The fans are going to be brutal. The media is going to be brutal, and you would think that a father would want his son to make it on his own devices, on his own talent. But no, LeBron James wants to play basketball so badly with his son that he is willing to make his son look like a nepo baby. He is a nepo baby, but even worse nepo baby by this whole draft shenanigans. So my jerk of the week are the LA Lakers and LeBron James for putting Bronny James into an awful situation where it's going to end badly no matter what.
No, you're probably right.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. He's going to make millions of dollars. He's from a rich family. He's going to have a nice life, but he would have been so much better served if he had spent 4 years in school, and made the NIL money and maybe have improved his game. He's not good enough for the G League. So anyway, let's wrap this puppy up. We're running long. We're running late, more I should say. So. Greg, if you could, as always, get out the social media and the thank yous and all that fun stuff.
First, thank you, of course, to Siddy Hall. That was wonderful, as usual. We always have a lot of fun talking with him, and this was a great time to talk to him. So it was nice getting caught up with his thoughts on everything that's been going on with the Pistons over the past several weeks. Good stuff there. If you want to follow Siddy on Twitter, I think he's just simply at Siddy Hall, SIDDYHALL. Do so there. You can follow me on Twitter, of course, at Greg Eno. Please subscribe to gregeno.substack.com. I'll be in your inbox every Monday. I would appreciate that. And of course, I have to thank my lovely wife, Sharon, for putting up with this nonsense. And of course, thank you, gentlemen, for making Monday nights so gosh darn fun.
And Nick, as always, please put out where people can find you online and talk all kinds of Detroit sports.
Well, I'll make it simple. I'm in one place, and that's on Twitter. If you want to call it X, call it X. I don't really care. It gets you to the same place. And you can look for me at Nick Milanovich. I'm usually kind of going back and forth with, Greg's on there to go back and forth with, and a bunch of other guys who are just enjoying, sometimes complaining, sometimes cheering on Detroit sports, and sometimes just wondering what the hell's going on. So come join the fun.
Yep. And just one tip, if you do follow Nick on social media, do not bring up Scott Harris. Word of warning.
Who?
And also, Greg, did you pimp your Substack?
I did.
You did. I just wanted to make sure. Well, I want to put it up because tell everybody what your latest article is about.
Well, I did a piece today that was about the signing of Tobias Harris by the Pistons, and my take was that it gives them some little bit modicum of legitimacy. And I made the comparison of when the Tigers signed Pudge Rodriguez after they came off a 43-win season, and that kind of jump-started their ascension. Not saying that necessarily the same thing will happen with the Pistons in that short time frame, but you got to start somewhere, and you got to start adding legitimate NBA players sometime, and hopefully this is the start of that.
Yeah, your keyboard to the NBA gods' ears. I'll just put it that way. So, all right. As always, if you first off, let me give a shout out to Nick and Greg for putting up with all the crap I've been I wouldn't say crap. I mean, I'm having a good time, but putting up with some of the changes in my life. I'm going to be on the road a lot more as Linda officially retired a couple weeks ago. Well, about 3 weeks ago at this point. So we're going to be spending a lot more time at our place in Northern Michigan, and it has limited bandwidth if you listen to the last podcast. So we're still trying to get that kind of figured out. But I want to give a thank you to those two for all the headaches it was trying. Good Lord, you should have seen me trying to even get the podcast uploaded. But I won't even go into detail about that. But again, a shout out to Nick and Greg for just being good sports about the whole thing. But I'm also warning the listeners now. Yeah, we may have some weeks where the podcast might be go up late, or the podcast might be limited in editing and that sort of thing. Again, we'll warn you. All right, with that, if you want to listen to the show, we're always available at any place podcasts are found. The most likely place to find us would be, of course, Apple Podcasts. We're on YouTube Music Podcasts. Google Podcasts is no longer a thing. I always have to remind people that. We're on iHeartRadio. We're on Spotify. We're on Amazon Music. We're on Deezer. We're on Radio Public. We're on Ghana. We're on the kneejerks.net. I actually just renewed that this weekend, so we're on the kneejerks.net for another year. But that's where you can find the homepage, all the links to our social media, the links to Greg's Substack, links to our guests. All that can be found on that webpage. You can also download the MP3 from there. And as always, please like, share, subscribe. If you like the show, pass it on, praise us, let us know. Just pass on the word. All right. I think with that, we can get the hell out of here. So on.
One more thing, actually.
Yes.
So our next, so we'll be reconvene in 2 weeks.
Yep.
And if I'm not mistaken, we will have Max Efkin on.
Yeah.
He is the one who maintains the website Bitter Cup of Baseball.
That's
and
right.
It's an extension of the conversation we had with Gary Cooper and Dave, I forget his last name now. Mesri. About a month or so ago, maybe a couple months ago, on the players who are not getting pensions from the Major League Baseball Players Association.
Right.
So I'm looking forward to it. He's a local guy, local to me.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, our left coast correspondent coming through in the clutch as usual. So, be on the lookout for that. Again, we'll have links to that in the show notes on the kneejerks.net. All right, with that, I think it's time to get the hell out of here. So until this time, 2 weeks from now, I'll be somewhere in northern Michigan, and Greg might be in his RV, and Nick will be out in the West Coast. This is Al Beaton saying good evening, good luck, and aloha, along with Nick Milanovich.
Good night, guys.
And, of course, Greg Eno.
Ciao, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks.